LarsCorp, where we make the possible impossible. And you might say, that doesn't make any sense. But I say, what if we make just really hard games? So, here's our team. And to our left is our core team, which consists of me, Lars, who the company is named after. And I'm the producer / lead artist. And to my right there is Tor, who is a Swiss Army knife programmer who will be working with me for a whole year. And to our right is our freelancing team, who are actually equally as important, but they will only stay with us for 2 months, as that's what our budget will allow for this time around. So we have Daria, who is our lead animator, and she has, I believe, 5 years of experience as well, with 3D as max. And to our right, again, we have our lead IT guy, whose name is Board, who has a whopping 8 years experience within the field. And he's going to focus mainly on website-related issues, as well as creating installer to our programs and a launcher. So here's our company vision. As you can see, it says ideality, camaraderie, progress, and solidarity. But that's actually out of order of how we wish to do things. We actually start at the ground, at a solid foundation, and through teamwork we can progress towards the ideal. In more practical terms, it means that we wish to recruit, reward, and retain great talents. So, as you can see, I'm of course referring to what I said earlier about our freelancers, who may just be part-timers for now, as we're only going to keep them for 2 months for this project. But after this project, hopefully we can afford to hire them full-time, as well as hire more people. And then I write something about establishing our roots in existing markets before excelling, and become more ambitious over time. And what that essentially means is that I don't plan on building castles in the sky, but build on a solid foundation on the ground, layer by layer, until we have like a solid backbone to sustain our future ambitions, both financially and in reputation. So if we in the future go for some crazy ideas, we should have the roots to back us up. Now, what does it mean to really establish our roots in existing markets before excelling? Well, it essentially means that we decide our games based on previous hits. I decided to look up the top-selling games of all time, and I used Wikipedia because they had already set up a list. But what I also did is that I cross-checked their numbers, because this is Wikipedia after all, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But the numbers actually seem to match up, except for Tetris, which is number 1. It's actually grown 4 times as big, landing on 425 million copies sold. But nevertheless, it's still not number 1, so that's always something. Now, why did I bring this up? So our challenge is, can we recreate one of these games by, for instance, making a Tetris clone or a Wii Sports clone? Well, to answer that question, we actually have to look at the production history. And I will only cover 3 of these games, otherwise we'll be here all day. So, yeah, let's just talk a little bit about that. So, Mobile Tetris. What's the story there? Well, it's important to know that Tetris was actually a game for the Nintendo Game Boy in the 1980s. And it was very popular, and it was a good in and out experience that wasn't too binding, but it was perfect on the go. What's also important to note is that it usually followed along with the Nintendo Game Boy, so if you bought on Nintendo Game Boy, you most likely owned Tetris. So, a lot of people had played Tetris, and in 2006, EA Games contacted the original developers and relaunched Tetris on the mobile platform, which of course made it a lot more accessible, as you could play it on iPhones and Androids and pretty much any phone really, making it the most mobile game you could get probably. And you also had the audience who still remember Tetris, so that's how it kind of got hand in hand. Actually, in my top 5 list, it actually expands down to top 30, so it's a top 30 list. And on number 6, you actually have Tetris for the Game Boy, so there you go. Wii Sports, however, usually came along with the Nintendo Wii. And in case you don't know, the Nintendo Wii sold the most consoles in the last gen console war. So if you had a Nintendo Wii, you probably had Wii Sports. That was the deal. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5, however, is the only game on this top 5 list to surpass previous sequels. It's important to note that GTA 5 is a sequel-based game. It's not GTA 1, it's GTA 5. That means there have been other games before it. And that means there's a formula, and it's been perfected, as it outsold its previous prequels. So this could help us deciding our game. Does this mean that we should make a GTA 5 clone? Well, that would be great, wouldn't it? But it's important to note that analysts speculate that the pre-production budget of GTA 5 is around $265 million. To put this in perspective, James Cameron movie The Avatar cost $237 million, while Disney's Frozen cost $260 million. We're gonna look at my budget later, but sorry. But my budget is on 1 million crowns, so it's not even close. Yeah, so it's a tricky situation. What do we do next? Well, if we do expand to a top 30 list, we find Diablo 3 at rank 30. Since 2012, they have sold 15 million copies as of February 2014. By math, I learned that if we capture only 1% of that audience, that's 150,000 individual sales. Unless we get pirated, of course, but I'm thinking if we charge $40 or 320 crowns per copy, we get $6 million or 48 million crowns. Of course, our price could go lower than that, and we would still make a profit, which is what we care about. But let's just say that's the price for now. Now, I did talk about a production budget when discussing GTA 5, so it's only fair that I do the same for Diablo 3. But unfortunately, I could not find a production budget for that game. But after researching the history for a while, it became clear to me that a production budget would not really help me, because Diablo 3 has been in the production for over 10 years. A lot of ideas and builds have been scrapped, and the game was initially planned to be very different from what we know today. So that's something to keep in mind. And furthermore, the game is developed by Blizzard Entertainment, the guys behind World of Warcraft, who have made an extremely popular game. Actually, they made several, like StarCraft, which is South Korea's national sport. So they have a lot of money that I do not have. So what do I do then? Well, I looked up another game called Torchlight, and that's actually also a Diablo clone. And the team behind it produced that game in 11 months, and it was made by a small team of 48 people. And they chose the project because it was a simple, humble game to start out with, for them at least. But it's important to remember that the guys behind Torchlight Runic Games consists of ex-Blizzard employees, so they knew what they were doing. But I'm thinking, if we aim smaller than Torchlight and make a game available for PC and iPhones, then that is something that appeals to us as developers, and it sounds like something we could do. But before we start, it's important to take inventory before pursuing our audience. So as I said, I will aim my game for PC and iPhone 5 to 6. I won't really go for tablets and other phones because specs can really vary, and we know more of the standard that the iPhone has. Furthermore, iPhone 5 and 6 have a particular RAM type, DDR3, which is nicer to work with compared to the iPads and older versions which use DDR2 RAM, which is essentially a lot weaker. Yeah. But enough about that, let's actually look at the sale number and see how many people own the iPhone 5 and 6. Right, so about 110 million people own these phones at the time of the conducted study. So yeah, that's great. Now, I also said we would look at PC numbers, and while Microsoft would not release official numbers, there is a game platform called Steam, which did reveal its user base. Not only that, but we also see that what kind of specs and operating system they are using. And it's handy to know that they have 125 million active users to this day. So, to take a quick break from statistics, I keep using the term Diablo 3 clone. And for those of you who don't know what Diablo 3 is, let me just show you a screenshot from that. So as you see, Diablo 3 is a top-down isometric viewed game. Basically, you walk around in a town, but you also hack down a lot of enemies. So when I'm creating a game, I'm creating a game that feels similar. So on the iPhone, it would look more like this. And as you see, it has a very similar interface, but at the same time, I added an analog stick and some buttons to the screen. So yeah, it should be, you know, if you feel comfortable with Diablo 3, you should feel right at home with my game, essentially. And like, it's also a good game if you want to play Diablo 3, but you only have your phone with you. So I will also aim my game towards shorter game sessions to make it easier to jump in and out. But enough about that, let's talk about my competition. If we look at the Apple App Store, I currently found 204 games fitting the dungeon crawling adventure genre, which Diablo fits within. Here are the top 5 sold games within that genre. And as we see, that one that has sold the most sold 25,000 copies for the price of $5. Now, am I satisfied looking at these numbers and pricing? Yes, because I do eventually plan on releasing the game to other mobile devices, but for now my budget won't really allow me to play test it on a lot of different phones, so it's smart to just roll with the iPhone for now. Furthermore, based on the pricing here, is it then ethical of me to charge any higher than $10? And I will say yes. Just because these games sell their games for $5 doesn't mean there aren't other great games in general on the App Store selling for 200 crowns. Like Star Wars The Knights of the Old Republic remake and XCOM, the enemy within game. So, oh yeah, and all the Telltale games, ranging from Back to the Future to The Walking Dead. So you have high-priced quality games on the network as well. In other ways, my game separates itself from these games is that my game aims to be even more satisfying in shorter play bursts than these. Some of these games are too complicated for being on mobile devices, I feel, and in that regard, my game will be very different. So, what's the market on Steam for dungeon crawling games? Well, I could only find 58 titles within the dungeon crawling genre, and some of these search results aren't really dungeon crawling games. Sure enough, they're top-down isometric view games, but take Shadowrun here, for instance, it's actually turn-based. So the only game on this list that I would be competing against is actually Van Helsing. But I feel our themes are different, visual themes, but also, again, my game is directed more at shorter play bursts, so my game is still very separated from that game. Also, I couldn't really find the numbers on these games, unfortunately. I could find how many people played them at some given time, but I couldn't find the exact numbers. And it's also important to remember that some of these games aren't only sold on Steam. They are also sold elsewhere. So I know it's not a perfect answer, but it's the best I could find. Let's talk budgeting. My budget is 1 million crowns. Now, how did I come across all this money? Well, due to personal savings, loans, family, and friends, I landed upon this fortune, and not everyone is gonna be able to get this kind of money, but I did. So, and this is before contacting Innovation Norway and other places. As we can see, we have 4 different budgets here, but if I could direct your focus down to the bottom right one, then that would be great. You can see staff cost would be roughly 500,000 crowns, and the software would be 64,000-ish, and additional cost would be 118, and I would then still have 250 crowns left as an emergency fund. But I do sum up everything I can think of in the additional costs window and staff window and software window. Yeah, and I do take into account 3ds Max subscriptions, Unity Pro subscription, and essentially a lot of things going on here. But you know what, I think I've actually talked for quite some time now, so I'm actually gonna just move on. And for some of you keen observers might say, but wait, Lars, you forgot to pay yourself as an artist, producer, and director. And I will say, no I didn't. I will not pay myself this time, unless it's an expense. So how do I get by? Well, I do have freelancing work on the side, and to be honest, I need my fellow workers more than they need me, so that's the deal. So, time management. Okay, so I see I included a little note there, and it says paid work will happen mostly within a year. The work on this chart that has no time bars is already completed by Lars. Yes, before I bring people along, I will actually do a lot of pre-production work before we enter production work. So, before I bring people along, I should have most of the 3D assets rigged and prepared. I should have 2D art and cutscenes done. I should have the game trademarked. I should also have a created website and started the company. So as you can see, I am the blue line, and by the way, I'm colorblind, so I don't really remember which color I assigned which. But I believe I assigned Tord the brown color, and Daria the red color, and Bård the orange color. I could be wrong, but either way, you have the notes in the top right corner. And as you can see, there's a lot of work where Tord and I will be doing work all year, and you will see Daria coming along for 2 months, and she will basically animate as much as she can, and I will, because I don't know much about animation, I will actually learn part-time there. So if she can't finish everything, then I will try and finish the rest myself, and she will obviously see what she has time for. And then you have the same deal with Board, who will also come in and work on the launcher and also installing the game, or working on the installer for the game rather. And after he's done, after 2 months, we can start beta testing, and that's essentially the plan in a nutshell. So let's move on. Releasing the game. So we'll have the launcher that Board is working on available on the website as long as people pay for it. We will also try our luck on Steam Greenlight first, and we'll talk a little bit about how to get greenlit later. Last but not least, also try to get our game on the iOS as soon as possible. So, marketing strategies. Obviously, get the word out that I have a website to as many as possible. This also includes Facebook, Twitter, newsletters for mail. Also write about my game as much as possible to anyone who's willing to listen. As long as I'm not obnoxious about it, obviously, but to an extent, yes, I have to. It's also important to announce when I have a new screen footage, and I should post some every other month. Last but not least, I should also contact Let's Players and reviewers and agree that they can use my footage as long as they discuss my game. Furthermore, I should also take this opportunity to tell them about my Steam Greenlight project, and that it would be really nice if they could send people over there if they like my game, which I hope they will, because I don't plan on producing shameless games. So yeah. And it's important to note that I got half of these tips from an online show on YouTube called Extra Credits. It's run by a team of game designers who had some really interesting ideas. So, risk assessments and the future. Well, I see 2 main risks I can run into, and that is not completing everything within the time limit, which isn't too much of a problem, because again, we're a really passionate group, and we don't mind working a little bit overtime, or a lot. So it'll be finished when we're finished. But we ran out of money. Yeah, that one's worse, obviously. But hopefully by now, we've actually focused enough to have some interesting gameplay footage to show off and to approach investors or publishers with, or even go to Kickstarter. After all, having footage to show has eliminated a big chunk of risk in terms of when an investor looks at you. While if you have no prior reputation or experience in creating games, when approaching Kickstarter, your chances of getting backing is significantly lower if you have no product to show at all. Whereas if you have some gameplay to show and say, hey, we're already working on this, but with extra money we can make it even cooler. But I could expand more on this, but really, you guys aren't stupid, so I think I'm just gonna wrap it up now so you guys can go home, and thanks for watching.